I came over today with the promise of some much needed assistance from our guest.
Really?
I didn't realize this was going to all be recorded.
Well, it is, because we record everything.
Well, get ready for a wild ride.
I'm going to be the Dr. Phil of watches.
You could be.
Although he's an asshole.
Really?
I
You
don't
met him?
respect that guy. No, I just don't respect what he does. He's not even a real therapist. He's just a hack.
But you are.
Yes,
So let's talk about that, Mr. Ray Santamaria.
Yes.
A.K.A. Ray the Mac.
that would be me.
A.K.A. probably one of the most old school IG/WatchUSeek/ wherever else you are screen names.
Yeah, I do like that one a lot.
You are going to discuss with us something that's very interesting and something we see a lot of, especially in this little watch fam, as we call it.
Yep.
And a lot of the, let's say, idiosyncrasies, quirks, and quite frankly, I see some of them as defects that affect our little community here and the way that people approach collecting in different ways, and there are different drivers.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I think we've got the right guy to talk about that, because Ray, you are an MFT.
I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California, which means I have a master's in clinical psychology. And my training and experience is in mental health issues, addiction, and trauma. I have some advanced training in those areas. And I also own 2 outpatient rehabs where we work with that population. And no watch addicts yet, but perhaps after this, we'll be getting some phone calls and emails about that.
Did you bring your forms here? Because Chase sounds like he's about to get admitted.
Yeah, you may actually leave this session white, shaking, and restrained.
I hope you have enough experience for that not to happen.
You know, I've been doing this a long time now, probably over 15 years. I've run outpatient facilities as well as residential facilities for other people. I've seen it all. I've had to actually take people and admit them to psych wards. I've had to ride in the back of ambulances. So it takes a lot for me to get rattled now.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, you're probably just a normal neurotic, maybe some mom and dad issues, and
I just called the
I'll hold
ambulance.
space for you, and you'll feel better.
Awesome.
We're going to go ahead and move in a different direction now and actually talk about
Watches.
Yeah, and the addiction of watches, and actually just the psychology of watches.
Yes. So what have you seen as a couple of the different peculiarities that affect this community that may be similar to what we see elsewhere or may be unique to it?
Well, the first thing I think of when we, talked about doing this show, and when I think of the watch community and the watch collecting hobby as it is, first off, we have these amazing brains with neurotransmitters and all of that, and everything that we do in life is driven by that.
Yes.
I do this for a living, and once I got into it for a while, then I realized, oh, wow, this actually fits my psychology.
Yeah.
This is my brain at work.
Right.
Holy crap. This is my addiction coming out right now.
Right.
And, the more I kind of see how us as collectors, different types of people, how we approach watch collecting, the highs, the lows, the intensities, it just really reminds me of some of the work I do with addiction. Now, I'm not saying that, it's the same, but some of the mechanisms are the same. I was actually talking with a friend of mine, Mark, who goes by Comics Fans on some of the Rolex vintage forums, and I think Sports Rolex is on IG. He's a big vintage Rolex collector. Mm-hmm. And the first time he and I met for coffee, we started talking about that idea of dopamine, that neurotransmitter, which a lot of people know as like that feel-good transmitter. That neurotransmitter dopamine, we get a lot of that when we do drugs and alcohol. Any substance of abuse, that's what happens to our brain. We feel good.
Right.
But also dopamine, again, I'm not a neuroscientist, so I'm probably hacking this if there's any scientists out there. But dopamine is also part of the memory system. Right. Mm-hmm. So what ends up happening is where we're kind of going in the addiction world is starting to understand addiction. You'll hear it as a disease. Some of the understanding, whether or not you believe it's a true disease or not, is that it is a disease of the brain, meaning addiction actually resides in the brain. Now, how that's different from actually ingesting the substance is we want to ingest a substance because it makes us feel better. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. But an actual addiction is in the brain before the substance. And what I mean by that is, for instance, if you're a crack addict, okay, and then I show you a crack pipe,
Right.
That's the addiction. You see that, you start salivating, you start to get the craving.
Right. Right.
That's actually what they're believing is the true part of the addiction. Now, your body will still be chemically dependent
Sure.
on a drug, but it's that process that happens even before ingestion.
Gotcha. So it's a predisposition, basically.
Exactly. So some people might smoke, marijuana, and it's no big deal. They get high. It might help with their dopamine and all that feels good. Great. There's a difference between that person and the person who suffers from addiction, who might be irritable. Go to their drug dealer's house, or we're in California.
Yeah, go to your neighbor.
You just go to your neighbor
Backyard.
or you go to the dispensary because you can't sleep at night. So you have like insomnia and a card.
Right.
And you go there. And once you actually get the weed in your pocket, you might feel relief. Let me just tell a personal story of when I actually really understood this idea that goes on in our brain. Therapists go to therapy too, at least they should. Okay. So I was working in Venice at a rehab at one time, and my therapist at the time was in East Hollywood. Okay. So at rush hour, I'm driving stressed out from a rehab that I ran all the way to East Hollywood for my own therapy.
Well, that sounds like hell.
Traffic, I haven't eaten, I was starving. It was the worst therapy session ever. I was road raging in my head. After that, I was in Hollywood. I live out in West LA. I'm starving. And I'm just like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to Pink's Hot Dogs. I'm going to get a chili cheese dog and chili cheese fries. I don't give a shit. Okay.
Yeah.
I drive over there through East Hollywood traffic, totally out of my mind, probably flipping everyone off, screaming, just ready to murder. I get in line at Pink's. I wait for about 20 minutes. I get to the front, and then I see a sign that says cash only.
Yeah, that's the worst.
I don't know if they had an ATM or I didn't have my debit card. For some reason, I couldn't do it. And of course, I wanted to just yell at the world. So then I get into my car and I go, I'm going to Carney's on Sunset. So just imagine all that boiling rage. I get to Carney's, right? I'm probably a dick to everyone. I get up to the front of the line. I order a chili cheese dog and chili fries and a Coke. I get my number. I sit down and I go, and suddenly I feel better. I'm not even hungry anymore.
Right, because the hunt is won.
Right.
Yeah, because whatever neurotransmitter, probably dopamine, I got relief because of the expected outcome.
Let's talk about that expected outcome, because I have my theory on the types of watch collectors there are.
Right.
My very favorite ones are the chasers. That's what I like to call them. Not you, Chase, the chasers. Chase as in, this is the thrill of the chase type of thing.
I wish that my face could have come through right there.
Yeah. Well, we'll have you replay that on Instagram Live one of these days. Right. So the chasers are the guys like Hoyer fan, for example, like Carlo. He is in it for the thrill of the chase, albeit he likes watches too, because there wouldn't be a chase if he didn't like the stuff that he's actually purchasing. But people that are online and basically scouring the entire world trying to find that something that's going to satisfy them. And a lot of times what happens is they'll pick it up, they'll have it for a short period of time, and it's gone like 2-3 months later. It's like, dude, you spent 3 years looking for this thing.
Well-
Where'd it go?
Well, how many of the chasers are also just flippers? I think chasers themselves are too broad of a category because there are very different types of a chase.
Yeah, no, I know. I've got everybody subcategorized here, but let's hear Ray, the actual therapist.
Let me
here.
talk about the chasers.
Okay, let's do that.
Chase. Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of subcategories underneath that, but I can tell you my own story of chasing. I think sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not, but I think that really can be connected to, eBay auctions.
Right.
I was looking for a Sin 156, couldn't find one on the forums at the time, was looking all over, and there was one at auction.
Okay.
It was in good condition, all of that. And of course, someone wants to outbid me. Okay, I'd been looking for it. Okay, I was feeling good, like I'm going to get a deal on this. Oh, I can't wait to get this watch. And then, of course, people start sniping and all of that.
Right.
And of course, I wasn't going to let them win. Of course, I wasn't.
Interesting.
Because I was part of them. Like, you're not taking my fucking watch from me. I have been searching for 6 months. Like, fuck you.
Right.
But really, it's fuck me. Because I probably paid about $400 more than I should have paid for that watch.
No kidding.
Wow.
Because I can tell you, my addictive personality came out in that eBay auction I was talking about.
Gotcha.
And this is how it relates to addiction. I mean, obviously this is a very, very benign example, but it's a good example for, even drug addiction, is I knew better. I didn't put my magic number in there because I didn't want to miss out. It was all or nothing.
Got it.
As a result, I paid more for it.
Yeah.
So I actually ended up doing something that in some ways, now I'm being dramatic here, was a little bit out of my control. I was wrapped up in that dynamic of intensity of winning for that watch, which is of course going to solve all my problems and fill the empty hole inside. Why that's a good example of, and again, benign and really not the same thing, but it really represents what we're talking about in terms of addiction. Addiction is that process of craving, inability to stop on one's own, and then creating unmanageability in their lives.
Got it.
So you are going to see chasers who do this and then actually end up creating unmanageability in their lives. For instance, there's been times when I've maybe chased 2 watches because I didn't want to miss them and they were really good examples. And I just didn't have the money for those at that time.
Right.
So I feel a little bit of a pinch. Now, of course, I'm not going to lose my house. My kids are still going to school, all that stuff. But that's where it starts to get into the realm of, should I really hold a credit card balance just for these watches right now?
Right.
And then, of course, I rationalize it because, I'm going to do this and sell that. And of course, I always move everything. But, I'm able to make that work. But that's a perfect example of where we push limits, not even just with watches, but whatever it is.
Right. And everybody has that. It's just, what level are you on?
Right.
I've been there. Of course I've been there. Actually, I'm doing something right now where I'm moving some money around because I want something else.
Exactly.
My description of addiction is it's okay to have an addiction. It's when it gets out of control, that's where you obviously become a problem for yourself and the people around you. You know, if you're switching things around, like you were saying, and you're putting up a line of credit on your house to buy a watch.
Well, then we're talking much like a gambling addiction.
Right.
So my take on addiction is, and there's a lot of different scientific and definitions, and everyone has their own definition, but it's this intense craving, at times this inability to stop, and it results in actual unmanageability in your life. So it does result in unintended or unwanted consequences. So, I would reframe that I think we all can have compulsions.
Sure.
We can all have some obsessions and passions
Yes.
that may show our quirkiness. I mean, that's part of our humanity. Part of being human sometimes. It can be an escape. And yes, there's brain science behind that too. But an addiction, if we use the word addiction, that actually has an added risk.
Got it.
That is, if it's an addiction, if someone truly had a watch addiction, it actually can have unintended consequences. It can have unwanted results. I think we're just all compulsive.
Stemming from that, the flippers, the ADDers of the watch world, after those, there's the hoarders. That's what I like to call them, is the people that get just a clusterfuck of watches under their belt, and they don't even wear the majority of them.
Well, it's, gosh, I actually, at one of my rehabs, I have an anxiety specialist who works with hoarding. We don't usually work with hoarders there, but he works with hoarders, outside. I can't say that I'm an expert on the hoarding mentality. With that said, I think there is a anxiety underneath the hoarding of, I can't let something go. What if I need it? It has an anxiety and obsessive compulsive component, which is really, I can control the outside world because my inner world feels so out of control.
Gotcha.
So
There's another aspect to consider with the hoarding. And it comes back to another psychological point of people also will always value something more, the same item, when they own it. So when it belongs to somebody else, it's worth X. As soon as you own it, you're going to find all these reasons why it's a little bit better. It happens with everything, whether it's a watch or a VCR or your car.
Right.
Yours is just better. Yours is more special.
You're almost transitioning into my next category, the fanboy, but we'll talk about that
hold
later.
on. I was going to say, we have to keep that in mind. That could also be, that could certainly contribute to the hoarding, is that once they get it, the perceived value is increased to a point where it's more difficult for them to sell it because they feel like they would be selling it under value once they get it.
So then that actually plays exactly into the point I was making, is a hoarder would have all these watches that they may not wear because somehow it regulates them.
Gotcha.
That's what we're talking about, like inner self-regulation. And I'm not saying people that keep a lot of watches are hoarders, but those that may be, there's probably that obsessive compulsive piece to it. And what happens is that becomes a way of actually regulating their psychology. That's why people might count, like 10 times when they touch a doorknob and all of that. It's because there's so much inner anxiety. That's something that can be controlled. It becomes a ritual that, at least in their mind, provides some relief.
Yeah.
And if we don't do it, bad things may happen.
Right.
So the hoarder mentality is, I have all these things. If I keep them, I'm okay.
Right.
If we're talking about a watch person who actually has that hoarding psychological issue. I don't want to offend, watch collectors who have a bunch of stuff they don't wear and it's just nice, because I do think there are those people out there that have, 200 watches just because they like collecting, just like baseball cards. And I think that there are those people that might have those 200 watches and it's actually more about their psychology than it is, hey, this is my cool collection.
Well, you touched on an interesting point, because you could have, we'll just say, two types of hoarders. This can actually apply to just about any category of person, whether it's cars or watches. And that is, what is the driver, internal or external? Do you have those 200 watches because you want to show them off to the world and you want to be congratulated or awed or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Are you owning those pieces for yourself, or are you owning them for other people? And that is, I think, the overriding question. I think before we classify anyone, and we probably should have said this at the beginning, or I should have said it in the beginning, I put people immediately, when I classify them, into one of those two boxes. Are you doing this for you, or are you doing this for anyone else? Is it jewelry, or is it pleasure?
Well, this has to be about the self-esteem then, right? So if we're talking about self-esteem, so the people that are usually going to be the ones that are in it for someone else are the ones that have low self-esteem and vice versa. Am I right about that?
Yeah. Some of my trauma training, like childhood trauma, developmental trauma, consists of some work with self-esteem. And when we talk about self-esteem issues, if I said to someone, you have self-esteem issues, most of us think that means we feel bad about ourselves.
Right.
Now, a self-esteem issue is actually a continuum. And I do this constantly with clients of mine, where I'll say, do you think you might have some self-esteem issues? No, I have really good self-esteem. I'm confident.
See, I would just say yes.
And but the thing is,
we all do. Come on, man.
but the continuum of self-esteem issues actually fluctuates between the less than, which is usually what we think of, right? And then the better than. Imagine like a scale going upward. At the top, you have better than. At the bottom, you have less than. Self-esteem issues bounce up and down between that. Healthy self-esteem is going to be in the middle.
Got it.
Imagine like an old school temperature gauge.
Right.
The mercury is going to be right in the middle. I'm okay, you're okay, I'm not less than, I'm not better than. So a self-esteem issue, for instance, might look like this. I walk into a room, a social gathering. Actually, this is real stuff that happens if you pay attention. Let's just say I walk into a get-together, my first time. Okay. First time I walk into LA Watch Gang. Okay.
Okay.
I walk in, I don't know anyone. Oh my God, everyone's better than me. Oh, they got. The defense to being less than is then the grandiosity of being better than.
Right.
Oh, that piece is lame. Who's that guy? That's an example of what can happen immediately, going from the less than into grandiose. So I am socially anxious. I'm scared of this. How can I defend against that? Oh, by making myself better than everyone and then being an asshole.
The lady doth protest too much.
Exactly. And, for instance, I just used, walking into like an LA Watch Gang get together for the first time as an example. But this is actually a true thing that's happened for me, where maybe a competing outpatient that a friend of mine owns, that I know these people, they do great work, right? And someone might choose to go to that outpatient than mine, okay? The first instinct is like, what did we do wrong? Why aren't they coming to us?
Sure.
Of course.
Right.
And then my next instinct is, fuck that. They're not going to be helped over there.
Right.
And that's the self-esteem issue. And I go, oh, wait a second. Wow, look at that in me. Now, I do think as humans, we have that anyway. I think as humans, we have these very idiosyncratic sort of issues that don't necessarily become diagnoses or symptoms of trauma. But it's part of our duty as advanced beings to be able to catch that.
Sure.
So this person chose this other place. It's because it was a good reason for them. And it doesn't mean that I, as a person, my value is affected by that. So how it goes back to the watch collecting is, you're right. Someone might have to have that, several $100,000 Richard Mille just to say like, hey, I got this. Woo.
Right.
Look, it's gold. There's only 3 made, blah, blah, blah. that potentially, I mean, I can't diagnose them, but potentially could fall into that, needing to be able to be one up and grandiose over others.
You just led right into the next segment of collector, the one that, I'll be honest, and this should come as no surprise since I've said before, I find to be with the least merit and the most distasteful for me. And those are the people that collect and whose desire for something is always inherently linked to other people's inability to have it. Whether it's as a result of, quote, rarity, which is, of course, manufactured in many cases because you can split a hair 1,000 times, or B, price. So it's just a matter of the less other people can have this, the more I want it. And that is, if we're talking about an internal versus external motivator, in my opinion, that is a 100% external motivator because the piece itself will not change whether they make 1, 10, or 1 million of them. The piece that you own will always be the same, but your opinion of it is linked completely to external factors.
Well, that goes along with even like, say, a Rolex. That's the best known brand in the world. People get a little bit of money. They want to like be taken seriously. And you get people who, their goal is to get a Rolex. You get some people like myself, when I was able to buy my first Rolex, actually my first Rolex was a gift for my wedding day. And the next one I bought was a Milgauss, which is no longer with us. And it was the first time in my life I was in a place where I can afford to start collecting. And I bought that. And yes, it was a Rolex, so it meant something to me. But my intention with that was less about what people thought and more about, wow, I've worked so hard.
Right.
And my wife just gave me permission to go get that. And I struggled with, should I spend that money? And it became this whole thing where my wife was actually like, you've earned it. You should get that if it's meaningful to you.
Right.
So I got it. And because it was a Rolex, it did have some meaning to me, but more about I am able to get this product because I worked hard, and it reminds me of my value as a hard worker.
Sure.
Whereas some people, they just want to get that new Sky Dweller because, they know it's blingy and it's solid
Big.
gold, and people are going to look at it and go, wow, dude.
Right. You've just described two completely different reasons. And even if it's the same watch we're talking about, you've talked about a completely internal motivation based on the value you yourself have imparted onto it. As a result of your own accomplishments or your own desires versus I want this because it's going to show everyone else what I've accomplished. That's totally different. I understand what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. And I just want to add, actually, that made me think how this relates to self-esteem issues. I love my collection. It is really important to me. And I got a big tax bill for last year. Okay. So of course, like I can make it go away by selling all my watches. I don't want to do that. And the idea of having to like move watches or liquidate them because of tough times, some people that may be terrifying because it takes away their value. Oh, I have to sell the Maserati, then I'm going to look bad. People are going to think I'm poor. It's going to look like I have a problem. That's not for me. What it is an actual grief and loss of that idea that, I worked hard for these.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love these because it's mine.
Yes.
I worked hard. I love these. And they are representations of I've been able to get a place in my life where I can have this hobby and enjoy it. And I found something that fits me. I found something where I can feel a part of, which really is, relational. Like I can feel part of an actual watch fam. Hashtag watch fam. And I love the acknowledgement because it was so lonely before where my wife doesn't give a shit about my watches. They all look the same to her.
Right.
But I can post something on Instagram, and not because I want people to stroke my ego, but people will be like, dude, that's awesome. I love the strap.
Right.
So
Like you become a part of a tribe.
I giggle. To me, it's just like, oh my God, thank you for, like, it feels important to me.
Sure,
That's an
sure.
important interaction. I have my personal Instagram account, and that's when I first started using that. I started to post some watch pictures, mostly because I saw other people doing it. When I look at hashtags, like, oh, that's so cool. There's other people out there that are totally lame like me,
Right. Yeah.
And so I started doing that. And some of my friends that followed me, my personal account, would start to make comments. And it started to rub me the wrong way. You know, they're just busting my balls and I'm not offended by it. But I started to realize, you know what? These aren't the people to share it with.
Right.
Because if I post like, oh man, I got this new BLNR, check it out. A friend might post, you know, an emoji like rolling the eyes and says, another one. Or another friend might say, oh, must be nice.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I'm in the wrong business. You know, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I realized, God, you know, this isn't the audience. So then that's when I kind of discovered, oh, wow, people actually have Instagram accounts that are nothing but watches. So I made that one. And the difference for me is when I'm interacting with people on that, it is about the interaction.
Yeah.
I am all about the interaction on Instagram. Now, of course, I love my numbers going up, but it's really about interacting. I actually check my feed every morning, every night. I see every picture. I like everything I like. I'll comment. And I love the people that do the same to me because I feel a part of. It's very important for me to feel a part of because I'm in a house filled with women, 2 daughters and a wife. They don't give a shit about watches. And I have a couple of friends who might kind of be into watches, but like they glaze over when I'm just like, dude, did you see on Chrono Trader or Instagram that Rare Birds has that Carrera for 98 grand and it has the Indianapolis logo on it? Oh my God, that's so sick.
Yeah.
And they're just like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
But I get giddy. So I can actually interact with people around that. So for me, it's not about showing off at all. It's actually about sharing.
Sure.
And the people I like to follow, and I think all the people I follow, they're about sharing too. I'll actually unfollow people that it feels like it's about showing off because I'm not interested in that. I no longer follow or people follow me. I will no longer follow back those accounts that are all luxury based. More power to them. That's great. It's awesome. But that's not for me. Nothing personal, but I don't follow Watch Anish. You know,
Neither do I, but that's not a watch account.
To me, that's just not where I'm at.
Sure. Yeah, it's a lifestyle account, and you're not a part of that lifestyle.
And that's totally great. Great watches, you know, much respect,
Sometimes.
you know, but it's just not my thing. And I no longer will follow like people who are just reposting, you know, a Richard Mille like on a Ferrari logo. Like, I don't care about that. There's no interaction there.
Right.
You know, that's not me. I want to share. I want people to share with me. I want to share back because I feel a part of. That's what this is for me.
Right.
Like, and this is why I love the watch, you know, collecting world right now, is because of social media. I found these other people. And, you know, there's get-togethers. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, me and 2 other guys got together at Commissary Coffee, you know? It turned into a watch discussion.
Totally.
And we had some watches and we were interacting. And it was just so awesome to have this. And I've been at other get-togethers where, you know, there can be a ton of watches out there, Rolex, whatever it might be. And it's never about showing off. It's about actually sharing.
So Ray, it was awesome for us to just
fun.
shoot the shit here.
Yes,
And
this was
I feel
really
much
great.
better. Thank you.
Oh, well, I had so much fun because I love talking about watches, but I definitely know more about psychology. So I kind of felt like this is a really great combo for me to feel really comfortable. So yeah, this was fun. Let's do it again.
This
Absolutely.
was perfect. Yeah, let's do it again. I have a feeling that we will because we definitely need to. There's so much to talk about. This episode of On Time was recorded and engineered by Michael Senderovich with supervision by Tim Haziano.
TMOTP is Ken Shu Production and Savada and Dune on social media.
Our theme song was composed and recorded by Hubie Wang.
For the entire OTP team, this is Mike.
And this is Chase. Thank you for listening to On Time.